Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're going into the forests.
Oh, the forests?
Yeah,
Oh,
the Pacific Northwest, to be more precise.
okay.
So you know those landscapes with those huge pines?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if you're lucky, you'll see some cool animals.
Right.
Well, we're going to be talking about a conflict that you might not expect.
Oh,
It's red squirrels
okay.
and lodgepole pine trees.
Interesting.
Yeah, so our source today is a 1998 study,
Okay.
and it shows that these cute little squirrels
Mm-hmm.
can really damage young pines.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're going to be looking at two ways to manage this from this study.
Okay.
One is thinning out the forest to try and get the squirrel population down.
Interesting.
And the other one is giving them other food to distract them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So get ready to learn about some clever ways to protect those trees
Okay.
while also keeping the whole forest healthy.
Yeah, that balance is so important. It's amazing how much these little creatures can really
Yeah.
mess things up. It's not just about stopping them from chewing the bark. Right. It's about understanding how everything fits together in this ecosystem.
Okay. So let's imagine for a second a young lodgepole pine.
Okay.
It's between 20 and 60 years old.
Yeah.
It's springtime. The sap is flowing.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, this little red squirrel comes along.
And that timing is key.
Wait.
Because spring is when the sackwood is like the best food,
Uh-huh.
and it's super easy for them to get to.
So they can just like,
Yeah, they just strip off the bark,
oh,
and
wow.
it leaves these strips behind with tiny little teeth marks.
Oh, so you can tell it's a squirrel.
Oh, yeah. You can tell it's not a porcupine or a wood rat or something.
Right. Those little guys are sneaky, but they leave their marks.
They do.
So let's talk about that first strategy.
Okay.
Thinning the forest. Now, this might sound crazy if you don't know much about forestry,
Right.
but think about a hectare of forest.
Okay.
It's like the size of a football field.
Got it.
Now, imagine 1,000 trees crammed in there
Okay.
versus only 500. That's what we're talking about with density.
Right.
And it really affects how many squirrels there are.
And fewer trees means
Yeah.
fewer squirrels and less of that bark stripping going on.
Yeah, exactly. So this study in British Columbia,
Okay.
they looked at stands with 500 or 1,000 stems per hectare.
Mm-hmm.
And there was way less damage to the trees over 5 years
Yeah, that makes sense.
compared to the denser ones.
Sure.
But here's the crazy part.
What's that?
You'd think that less trees would mean the forest grows slower.
Yeah, I guess so.
But actually, it's the opposite.
Really?
Yeah, because there's less competition for things like sunlight and water.
Oh, I see.
The trees that are left actually grow faster and stronger.
So it's like a win-win.
Yeah. The foresters are happy and the trees are happy.
Yeah, that's really cool. It just shows how everything is connected.
Exactly.
This study goes even further
Oh, yeah.
because thinning a forest doesn't just affect the trees and the squirrels.
Right.
It affects all the small mammals.
So it's not just about getting rid of the squirrels.
Exactly.
It's about how any change affects everything else.
Yeah, and they found something really interesting.
Okay.
When they thinned the forest, which you'd think would mean less places for animals to live,
Right.
it actually increased the types of small mammals.
Really? I would have thought it would be the opposite.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising, but when you think about it,
Yeah.
it makes sense because you're creating these new little habitats.
Oh, I see.
So different levels of thinning actually make different mammal communities.
Like what?
Well, they saw a lot of deer mice in the really thinned out areas,
Okay.
and voles liked the denser undergrowth in the moderately thinned ones.
Wow, so it's like making a bunch of different neighborhoods,
Exactly.
each with its own mix of animals.
And that diversity is really good.
Yeah.
It means the ecosystem is healthy and can bounce back from problems.
So thinning the forest could be good for the trees
Mhm.
and for all the different animals living there.
Ex-
Okay, but let's talk about that other strategy.
Okay.
The one that sounds almost too good to be true.
What
Yeah, feeding the squirrels to protect the trees.
I know, right?
Tell me more about this diversionary food thing.
So basically, they put piles of sunflower seeds all over the forest.
Sunflower seeds.
Yeah, to lure the squirrels away from the young pines.
Like a little squirrel picnic.
Pretty much. But the question is, does it actually work?
Yeah, does it?
Well, the study showed that in the areas where they put the sunflower seeds,
Yeah.
there was way less damage to the pines.
Really?
It seems like those squirrels just can't resist a good snack.
But why sunflower seeds? Are they like squirrel crack or something?
Well, they are pretty tempting, but the real reason is the nutrition.
Oh.
So sunflower seeds taste good to squirrels and they fill them up,
Oh, right.
but they aren't as nutritious as the sapwood.
So it's like junk food for squirrels.
Yeah, exactly. They get a quick energy boost,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't make them have tons of babies.
That's smart. But doesn't adding all these sunflower seeds mess with the rest of the ecosystem?
That's a good question. They were worried about that too.
Yeah.
But the study found that it didn't really affect other small mammals.
Huh. So no big impact on the populations or the diversity.
Nope.
So it seems like we have two ways to manage these squirrel problems.
Yeah.
Thinning, which seems to help the forest and the animals, and diversionary food, which targets the squirrels without messing up the whole ecosystem.
Right.
But didn't the study mention a third approach?
You have a good memory. You're right. They did mention a third approach.
Okay, so what is it?
It's kind of like thinning, but with a twist.
Oh.
I'm intrigued.
It focuses on the size of the trees.
Okay.
You see, red squirrels seem to do less damage to trees once they get to a certain size.
Interesting. How big are we talking?
They found that trees with a DBH of 20 centimeters or more.
DBH. What's that?
Oh, sorry. DBH stands for diameter at breast height.
Okay.
So imagine wrapping a measuring tape around the tree trunk at about chest level. Okay, that's the DBH.
Got it. So the bigger the tree, the less the squirrels like it.
It seems that way. Those bigger trees might be harder to chew on.
Oh, that makes sense.
Or maybe the sapwood just doesn't taste as good at that point.
Right. So it's like the older trees have their own defense system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They've toughened up over time.
Wow. So size really does matter in the forest.
It does.
Yeah.
But the question is, how do we use this knowledge?
Yeah. How do we actually manage the squirrel damage?
Remember how we talked about thinning leading to faster tree growth?
Yeah. Less competition, more resources.
Right. By thinning strategically, we can actually help the remaining trees grow faster.
And make them less tasty to the squirrels.
Exactly. It's like a 2-for-1 deal.
So we're reducing the squirrel population directly and making the trees grow up faster so they're less appealing in the long run.
It's like playing chess with the forest.
Exactly.
We're thinking long.
Yeah, and working with nature to protect the trees.
And keep the forest productive.
Exactly. It's not about getting rid of all the squirrels. It's about finding a balance so both the trees and the squirrels can do well.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But are we saying thinning is like the magic solution?
Not necessarily. Each strategy has its pros and cons.
Okay.
The best approach really depends on the specific forest and what the goals are.
Right. Because thinning does change the habitat for other animals too.
Exactly. We can't forget about them.
Speaking of the whole ecosystem, let's go back to biodiversity for a second.
Okay.
We talked about how thinning can increase the types of small mammals.
Yeah.
But is that always a good thing?
That's a good question. More diversity is usually good,
Right.
but it's not always about having the most species.
So it's not just quantity.
Right. It's also about the specific types of mammals that are there.
So like different species do better in different densities.
Exactly. So you get these different but equally important communities.
So we're back to that mosaic of habitats.
Yeah. Each with its own unique mix of plants and animals.
And that's what makes a healthy forest.
Exactly. That variety makes the whole ecosystem stronger.
So we've looked at 3 main ways to manage red squirrel damage.
Right.
Thinning, to reduce the squirrel population and help the trees grow faster.
Yep.
Giving them diversionary food like those sunflower seeds. And thinning to help the trees get bigger so they're less appealing.
And we've seen how these strategies affect not just the squirrels and the trees, but the whole small mammal community and the diversity of the forest.
It really shows how everything is connected.
It does.
Okay, so we've learned a lot.
We have.
But why should we care about red squirrels and lodgepole pines?
That's a good question. This deep dive shows us something really important.
What's that?
It shows how important it is to manage wildlife in a holistic way.
Holistic.
Yeah, thinking about the whole ecosystem. So instead of just trying to wipe out a so-called pest, we need to find solutions that work for both humans and the whole ecosystem.
So like balancing our needs with the needs of everything else.
Exactly. And this applies to so many other situations around the world.
Like,
We'll think about deer that eat too much in some areas.
okay.
Or beavers building dams that cause problems.
Right.
Or elephants that raid crops.
Yeah.
The principles we've talked about today can help us find better solutions.
So instead of just fighting against nature, we're trying to work with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that leads us to a really important point.
Okay.
This shift in thinking raises some ethical questions.
Well, how so?
Well, as we get better at managing the environment and animal behavior, we have to be careful and responsible.
That makes sense. We don't want to cause more problems trying to solve the first ones.
Exactly. We need to think about the long-term impacts and make sure we're not just going for quick fixes.
And we have to make sure we're not putting human needs above everything else.
Absolutely. These are big questions.
Yeah.
And there aren't easy answers.
But we have to think about them.
We do.
Yeah.
It's all part of figuring out how humans and nature can live together.
So this deep dive into red squirrels and lodgepole pines,
Mm-hmm.
it's given us some surprising insights.
It has.
And it started some important conversations.
Yeah.
It shows us that even tiny creatures
Like those red squirrels.
can have a huge impact on their environment.
And that what we do can affect the whole ecosystem.
It's a reminder to be humble and respectful
Absolutely.
and to find solutions that help both people and the planet.
And maybe, just maybe, those little red squirrels,
Yeah.
they've shown us a way to create a better future.
A future that's more sustainable and more compassionate.
That's a great thought to end on.
It is. So to all our listeners out there, keep exploring
Keep asking questions.
and keep looking for those win-win solutions.
That make our world a better place.
Until next time, happy deep diving.
Bye, everyone. So this third approach, it's all about tree size.
Tree size.
Yeah, they found that red squirrels, they don't do as much damage to bigger trees.
Makes sense.
Well,
I guess those big guys are tougher.
yeah, maybe they are tougher to chew on.
Or maybe the sapwood just isn't as tasty once they get older.
Could be. It's
Oh,
like
man.
those older trees have learned to defend themselves.
Right, so how do we use this to our advantage?
Well, remember how thinning can actually help the trees grow faster?
Yeah, because there's less competition for resources.
Exactly. So if we thin strategically, we can speed up that growth and make them less attractive to the squirrels.
So it's like a double whammy.
Yeah, we're thinning out the squirrel population.
Right.
And making the trees grow up faster so they're less appealing in the long run.
It's like we're playing chess with the forest.
We are. We're thinking long term.
Right.
Working with nature to protect those trees and keep the forest healthy.
And productive.
Exactly. And it's not about wiping out the squirrels entirely.
Right. It's about finding that balance.
Yeah, where both the trees and the squirrels can thrive.
But are we saying that thinning is the ultimate solution here?
Not necessarily. I mean, every strategy has its pluses and minuses.
Right.
The best approach really depends on the forest itself.
And the goals.
Yeah, what are we trying to achieve?
And we have to remember that thinning does change things for other animals too.
Exactly. It's not just about the squirrels and the trees.
It's about the whole ecosystem.
Right.
Which brings us back to biodiversity.
Okay.
We talked about how thinning can actually boost the types of small mammals.
Mm.
But is more diversity always a good thing?
That's a good question. You know, more diversity is often seen as a sign of a healthy ecosystem.
Yeah.
But it's not always about having the most species possible.
Okay.
It's also about the specific mix of species that are there.
So different species might thrive at different densities,
Exactly.
leading to different mammal communities.
But they can all be valuable in their own way.
So it's about having a variety of habitats,
Yeah, like a mosaic.
each with its own unique blend of plants and animals.
And that's what contributes to a resilient forest.
One that can adapt and bounce back from challenges.
Right.
So we've explored 3 main strategies for dealing with this red squirrel issue.
Thinning, providing diversionary food, and manipulating tree size.
And we've seen how these strategies affect not only the squirrels in the trees,
But the whole shebang.
entire small mammal community and the overall biodiversity of the forest.
Yeah, it's fascinating how interconnected everything is.
It is.
Yeah.
So why should we care about all of this?
That's the million-dollar question.
What's the bigger picture here?
Well, this deep dive into red squirrel management,
Yeah,
it shows us that we need to think bigger when it comes to wildlife.
not just focusing on one species.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about taking a holistic approach.
Considering the whole ecosystem.
That's it. Instead of just trying to get rid of a so-called pest,
Right.
we need solutions that work for everyone, humans and the environment.
It's about finding that balance.
Exactly. And this applies to so many situations all over the world.
Like what?
Well, think about deer overgrazing in some areas, or beavers building dams that disrupt things,
Yeah.
or elephants raiding crops.
Right.
These same principles can help us find better ways to manage those conflicts.
So it's about shifting our mindset,
Yeah.
moving away from conflict and towards collaboration.
Exactly. Instead of seeing wildlife as the enemy.
We need to find ways to live together.
And that brings us to a crucial point.
Okay.
This new way of thinking raises some ethical questions.
Like what?
Well, as we get better at manipulating the environment
Yeah.
and influencing animal behavior, we need to be responsible.
We have a lot of power.
We do. And we need to use it wisely.
We need to think about the long-term consequences of our actions.
Absolutely. We don't want to create new problems while trying to solve old ones.
And we can't just prioritize human needs above everything else.
Right. We need to find solutions that benefit everyone.
So this deep dive into the world of red squirrels and lodgepole pines. It's really opened our eyes to some important issues.
It has. It's a reminder that even small creatures,
Like those squirrels.
yeah, can have a big impact.
And it shows us that our actions can have ripple effects throughout the ecosystem.
So we need to be mindful and respectful.
And always strive to find solutions that work for both humans and the natural world. Okay, so we've been talking about red squirrels and lodgepole pines.
Right.
But I'm thinking, could we use what we've learned for other wildlife situations?
That's a great question. You know, we saw how well manipulating the habitat worked.
Yeah, like thinning the forest and creating more space.
Right. It helped control the squirrel population.
And it even boosted the biodiversity.
Exactly. So could we use this approach with other species?
In other ecosystems.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, like, what about those deer?
Deer.
Yeah, you know how they overgraze in some areas?
Right. They can really damage the plants.
And even affect the whole ecosystem.
Definitely. So could we try something similar?
Like carefully thinning out some trees.
Or maybe even planting specific types of plants.
Yeah, plants that can handle being grazed.
Exactly. And that would still provide food and shelter for the deer.
It's about finding that balance.
Right. Where both the plants and the deer can thrive.
So instead of focusing on reducing the deer population,
we're actually making the ecosystem stronger.
Right. It's a totally different way of thinking about it.
It is. And it could be really effective.
What about beavers?
Beavers.
Yeah, they can cause problems with their dams.
Oh, yeah. I've heard stories about them flooding areas.
And disrupting the water flow.
Right.
But they're also important for the environment.
They are. So instead of just removing their dams all the time,
yeah,
maybe we could create special areas for them.
Where they're allowed to build dams.
Exactly. It would benefit both the beavers and the ecosystem.
And maybe we could even use their skills.
Their dam building skills.
Yeah, to restore wetlands or create new habitats for other animals.
Now that's thinking outside the box.
It's like we're partnering with the beavers.
Instead of fighting against them.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so what about that other strategy?
You mean the diversionary food?
Yeah. Could we use that for other conflicts?
Like keeping elephants out of crops.
Yeah, exactly. Could we offer them some kind of alternative food?
In a safe place away from farms and villages.
Right. It would have to be something they really love.
Yeah, something irresistible.
But we'd have to be careful.
Of course.
Yeah.
We need to make sure it wouldn't harm the elephants.
Or their ecosystem.
Exactly. We don't want to create a new problem while solving the first one.
So it seems like the key takeaway here
What's that?
is that managing wildlife effectively is complicated.
It is.
We need to really understand the ecosystem.
And be willing to try new things.
And most importantly, we have to find solutions that work for everyone.
Humans and the natural world.
Exactly. So I guess that's the message for our listeners.
What do you mean?
Well, we've learned so much from these red squirrels and lodgepole pines.
We have. It's amazing how much we can learn from nature.
It is. It reminds us that everything is connected.
And that our actions can have a big impact.
Whether we realize it or not.
Right. So we have to be careful and thoughtful.
And always look for those win-win solutions.
That make the world a better place for everyone.
Well said. I think that's a perfect note to end on. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning.
And keep learning from the natural world.
And remember, even the smallest creatures can teach us big lessons.
They can.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.